Hey, what's up, guys? Thank you for joining on this, I guess, continued tour of my house. This is it's my son's little kitchen and whatever behind me. So, yeah, here we go. To begin with, hopefully you've had a chance to look over the student example I posted. These are 2 body paragraphs. We're going to talk about them. I kind of view this, since it's, getting about that time, right, with these papers, I kind of view this as, like one more attempt at really diving into some of your work and having you guys sort of refocus on the structures we've talked about all semester, as well as the approaches we've taken to thinking about evidence, stuff like that. Everything I'm going to go over, I firmly believe we can all do. We just don't always do it. So this is easily, I think, one of the more important videos that I've posted. So anyway, to begin with, backstory. I have access to more of the students' work, like their introduction, their thesis, all that stuff. I don't actually quite know what happened either, which is to say we need to know what happens, right? We talked about this in class. It was like, 4 sentences or so right at the top of your introduction to help us understand what happened. I mean, we have an idea, especially in that second body paragraph, but we don't exactly know, and that would be helpful. For instance, I don't even know this girl's last name. Let's maybe get that in there, right? I would have Googled her, but it felt like it was going to be a lot of work without her full name. So, last names help. Anyway, the good news, we're talking about body paragraphs, so we don't exactly need that, right? To begin with, let's look at the first body paragraph. What seems to be the focus of this body paragraph, right? Think about the 3 I's, think about the way we talk about body paragraphs. You should be able to look at that first sentence and know what we're going to talk about. Does Emily deserve another chance? So we're going to talk about that, I guess. Well, let's see how we do. Obviously, the most important element after that is the quoted material, which we probably take too long to get to. Okay, so we want to get to that much quicker. Rather, we have 2 quotes. I'm sorry, I was looking at the second quotation. We have the first quotation, and it says she feels like a monster, but we just use that to say she feels remorse. I'm not sure that that's something we need to prove, but more on that in a second. Maybe we do, but that's kind of tough. The second quotation, though, is the one I was most interested in, simply because this is her response, right? And it seems like a fine response. It's an interesting response. My issue with this first paragraph, and again, I'm trying to be like right to the point with this stuff. These are things I want all of you to watch for in your own work. We're focused on her in this paragraph, right? The point of this paper, as all the arguments we try to make, what does this say about us as a people, society, a culture, right? Like, what is the response to this young woman say about us, to say about how we view people, or how we think, or maybe what values we have, as the case may be. But here we're talking about her, and I'm not saying you can't do that, but always it has to be in service of that larger argument, and I'm not sure this is right now. Now, the good news is I think it can be rather easily. So, for instance, the first quotation, again, she feels like a monster. She shows remorse. Maybe that helps. I'm less interested in that, to be honest with you. The second quotation, she says, I want everyone to feel safe and welcome. So if that's the price of call-out culture, then yeah, I prefer that world. And our student author, helps us understand that by call-out culture, she means cancel culture in the way that we've talked about it. But that's really interesting that she calls it something else. You could argue, this is argument now, she considers it differently. She, just by her phrasing, doesn't necessarily see it as the process of being canceled, right? It's this process of, as she says, calling out, sort of noting when somebody has messed up and making sure that they know about it, making sure that other people know about it. It's public shaming, right? And that's part of cancel culture, but I would argue, given her phrasing, that her version of it probably doesn't go as far. And that's an important distinction. So you could say that, you know, she prefers this world where people feel safe, and she thinks call out culture is a way to achieve that. But in her scene, I guess we're talking about this like Virginia punk scene, which is terribly specific. Maybe that's how they tend to use it, is call out culture, not cancel culture. So the argument there is that it's not seen as a way to sort of make someone disappear, right? It's read differently to people like Emily. That could be super important, actually, specifically because of what happens in the second one, right? This other guy we hear from is talking about cancel culture, right? He says, here, let me find it. Hold on. Well, all right, sidebar real quick. We're obviously we're going to spend this whole time talking about quotations. They're vitally important. What I want you to take away from this, if you take nothing else, and I'm going to give you another example, but you guys are still fighting me on the whole focus on details thing. And it's an easy trap to fall into, especially with a lot of the texts you guys have chosen for this assignment. You're going to pick stuff you're into, the people you're interested in, maybe you're a fan, whatever. And when you do that, it's very easy to just start talking about that stuff because you know about it, but you're into it, and you talk about what you're into, right? We all do. Instead of that, as always, focus on details. So the one phrase I chose to focus on that I would rather see this paragraph built around in the first paragraph is the difference between call-out culture and cancel culture. Like, you could argue, I mean, yeah, she's remorseful, but again, that's obvious. But you could argue she sees this process as a means of public shaming, and that's as far as it goes, maybe. That could be important, right? With maybe how she handles things or what she thinks she's in for versus what she's actually in for. The second paragraph, we get two quotations. The first one, I don't know who says that or when, or, I mean, I kind of know why. You always have to provide context for your quotations, right? So that's kind of, we can't really talk about that one just because we don't know enough about it, like what's going on around it. The second quotation, though, let me find it. Longish paragraph, by the way. The second paragraph quotation is from this guy who called her out to begin with. Again, in the introduction, if we get a better explanation of the backstory, then maybe we would understand what that means. But it's better. It's better than the first quotation, context-wise. And he says, "No, I don't care. I don't care because it's obviously something you deserve." Talking about Emily. It's something that's been coming for a minute. I literally do not care about what happens to you after the situation. I don't care if she's dead, alive, whatever. And then what do we say about the quotation, though, after that? I mean, if you translated those sentences, they all kind of amount to, that's rough, right? And again, that's not really something we're trying to argue. We know, like, you hear someone say that about another person, and you're like, damn, right? So let's not do that. Again, as with all quoted material, find something to focus on, a significant detail. What stands out to you? What seems, and there's a couple things you could pick, but there's one phrase here, one thing this guy says that is more significant than the rest of it. I don't care if she's dead, alive, whatever. Like, wow. He may not mean that, but it sure sounds like he does. So again, what do we do with that? Well, we have a very specific thing now that we can talk about. What does it mean when a person claims that they don't care if someone else is dead, alive, whatever? How do they view that person? Well, they don't like them. Yeah, but again, that's not, go a little deeper, right? How do they view that person? How do they conceive of that person if they don't care if they're alive, dead, whatever? Especially that whatever, like that's pretty loaded. Well, I think one argument we can absolutely make here, if again we're kind of focused on what this says about us, our response when it comes to cancel culture, we could very easily, I think, talk about this sort of dehumanizing aspect to cancel culture, right? And we talked about this in class several times. But, I mean, when you say that about a person, you're basically also saying you don't see them as a person, right? Let's talk about that. That absolutely has to be the focus of this paragraph, I think. Now, when you're making these changes, what does that sort of look like? Well, in this body paragraph, number one, maybe that first quotation stays. Again, I don't know enough about it to know whether or not it's useful. Right now, I don't know that we're doing a lot with it. Maybe we could with the same process we've talked about as far as focusing on significant details goes. But for now, that second quotation is the moneymaker, right? We're talking about this dehumanizing aspect of cancel culture. We basically, with how it works, it almost encourages us to not see people as people. Let's get that in a topic sentence. Let's get that second quotation much closer to the top of the paragraph. Let's talk about that dehumanizing aspect, motivation, quality, however you want to phrase it. That needs to be the focus of this body paragraph. And again, maybe it took them writing all of this to get to that quotation, and you notice too it's at the bottom of the paragraph, so they don't give themselves enough time to really maybe fully think about it. But that's the trick every time. Start with some kind of topic sentence. Chances are good it's not going to be great. You have to know that though. Then get your quotations, give me some context for those quotations. Understand I'm not in your head, so I don't know this stuff like you do. You have to actually tell me who said this and sometimes when, sometimes why, right? Give me that context, because that's gonna change how we read the quotation. And then, most important of all, when it comes to that quotation, find details. You don't quote for ideas, usually. You quote for language, okay? This guy has some really loaded language. Emily has some really loaded language in that first paragraph. That's what you have to do. And then once you focus on those details, you do a good bit of thinking about that on a page, then you can go back, revisit that topic sentence, and give me a better one. Give me one that's more focused, more specific, right? One that's an argument, yeah? That's what you do throughout the body of the paper. Last little bit of recap. Keep in mind, we need that backstory in the introduction. Thesis works like it always does. Roadmap works like it always does, right? I think we've gone over that stuff enough for you guys to have at least a decent idea of what I'm asking you for with that. But I'm telling you, if you focus on the body of this paper first, making it as tight as you can, as specific as you can, really focus on those details, it's gonna make writing a good introduction, a really good thesis, much easier. All right, anyway, as I think I've said before, this is probably the last video, at least the last one where I'm gonna ask you guys to think about somebody else's text, right? I want you focused on yours now, but I thought one more really strong attempt at this is what you sort of need to make sure you're doing, what you're focused on. I thought that was worthwhile. There may be another video, but it won't be like this. It'll be more like class business related stuff. All that said, I hope everyone's well, at least as well as you can be. We're pretty insane over here. The boys are crazy. And yeah, that's all I got. I'll catch you guys later.